The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the sterile, cold clinic, casting long shadows on the floor. Maya stood frozen in the doorway, heart pounding in her chest, the heavy scent of antiseptic mixed with the faint odor of fear. There, on the table, lay a German shepherd, his fur matted and dirty, his eyes sunken, pleading in a way words never could. His breath was shallow, slow, each one an agonizing effort. He was broken, on the verge of being euthanized. Maya's mind raced, heart warring with her every instinct. She had only come here to help the shelter, to volunteer for a few hours before her afternoon classes. But the moment she saw him, it was as if the world had stilled. She knew, deep down, that he wasn't just any dog. He wasn't supposed to be here, lying at the edge of his last moments, waiting for a needle to take him from this world. His soul was too strong to surrender so quietly, and something in her urged her to act. She stepped forward, unsure what would happen next, unsure of what she was about to do. All she knew was that there was no way she could walk away. Show your love, hit like, share, and subscribe for more. The clinic's sterile air stung Maya's nose, an overwhelming mix of antiseptic and the faint, underlying scent of fear. It was a smell she knew too well, one that hovered in the corners of every shelter she had ever visited. The sharp, clinical atmosphere was nothing new to her, but today, it felt different. Today, the air pressed against her chest, making it harder to breathe. There was a heaviness in the room that she couldn't ignore. Her eyes scanned the familiar surroundings. The worn white walls, the dim fluorescent lighting that flickered slightly, casting cold shadows across the floor. The muffled sounds of distant footsteps and faint voices barely registered in her mind. But her attention was completely captured by the table in the middle of the room, where a German shepherd lay motionless. His once proud, thick coat was now matted and filthy, his body thin and his eyes dull, as if life had drained out of him over time. Maya stood frozen in the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't prepared for this. No one had warned her about the dog they were going to put down that afternoon. Her usual tasks, cleaning kennels, feeding the animals, providing companionship, had been routine. But this was different. The dog, his name was Rex, though she hadn't been told until now, lay with his head resting heavily on the table. His body rose and fell with shallow breaths, each inhale a fragile echo of the life still hanging on inside him. She could hear the faint rasping sound, a kind of gurgling struggle that cut through the silence. His chest barely moved, and his once alert eyes, sharp and commanding, had faded into a hollow, unreadable stare. Maya's throat tightened. She couldn't quite pinpoint why, but something about this dog, about Rex, pulled at her in a way she had never expected. It wasn't just his condition. It was his presence. There was an undeniable sadness in his form, yes, but also something else. Something Maya couldn't name but felt deeply in her bones. She had seen animals in worse states. She had cared for countless dogs and cats who were abandoned, neglected, or abused. She had watched them recover slowly, the light returning to their eyes, the strength coming back in their limbs. But this, Rex wasn't just any dog. He was different. He wasn't just a case. He wasn't just a rescue. He was a soul, quietly, painfully waiting to be saved. And yet no one here believed he could be saved. The people around her, the shelter workers, the vet, had made up their minds. Rex's health was beyond repair, they said. He had been left in this condition for too long. He was too old, too weak. The decision was already made. Euthanasia was scheduled for later that afternoon, and no one, least of all Maya, could stop it. She stood there, her feet stuck to the floor, staring at the dog who had given up on life long before he had ever entered this room. His ragged breaths seemed to echo off the walls, and Maya could feel the crushing weight of the situation. She was just a volunteer, just a teenager with no medical background, no experience in saving animals. What could she possibly do? But that voice inside her, a voice she had learned to trust, wasn't going to let her walk away. She couldn't do it. She couldn't just let him go, not without trying. He deserved more. He deserved a chance. Maya's heart pounded harder as she approached the table slowly, her legs shaking beneath her. The faint hum of the lights overhead did nothing to calm the growing storm in her chest. Every step felt like an act of defiance. Every movement she made was against the current of the room's cold, methodical finality. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to question the vet's judgment, but in that moment, she realized something that would forever change her. She wasn't ready to give up on Rex. She reached out slowly, her hand trembling as she hovered near his head. The smell of his fur, the stale, musty scent of neglect, filled her nostrils. But beneath it, Maya could still detect the faintest trace of something more. Something that had never been completely extinguished. Rex was still here. He was still fighting. "Hey there," she whispered, her voice a soft, trembling murmur that was swallowed by the silence of the room. She wasn't sure why she said it. Maybe it was to reassure herself. Maybe it was to reach him in a way no one else had tried. The words felt foreign, but they carried the weight of everything she couldn't put into action. She placed her hand gently on his head, her fingers brushing through the tangled mess of his fur. Rex's ears twitched at the contact, and for a split second, his dull eyes flickered with recognition. It wasn't much, just the slightest change. But it was enough. It was enough for Maya to know that she had to try. She leaned in closer, her forehead nearly touching his, her heart racing in her chest. "I'm not going to leave you," she whispered, even though she wasn't sure how she could follow through on that promise. But in that moment, the words felt like the only thing that mattered. "You're not alone." And somehow, inexplicably, Rex's shallow breath seemed to steady for just a moment, like he was holding on for a little longer. It was an unspoken pact between them. Maya wasn't ready to let go, and Rex wasn't ready to leave. The clock on the wall ticked on, indifferent to the growing bond between them. The minutes slipped away, but Maya knew one thing for certain: she couldn't walk away. Not yet. Not until she knew that this dog, this beautiful broken creature, had a chance to fight. She didn't know how she was going to do it. She didn't have a plan, but she had something else, a deep, burning instinct to do whatever it took to save him. She stood up, her hand still gently resting on Rex's head. Her mind raced with possibilities, but all she could think of was one thing: she had to fight. If there was a way, any way, she would find it. And she wouldn't give up on him. Not today. Not ever. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and uncertainty. Maya returned to the shelter early each morning, sometimes before the sun even rose, and stayed late into the evening when the cool, quiet air settled over the clinic. She refused to let Rex face another moment alone. His condition was still grave, but there was something in his eyes now, a flicker of hope, a trace of trust, that kept Maya coming back. The vet had tried to discourage her, reminded her that Rex was old and sick, his time running out. But Maya wasn't going to listen. She couldn't. Every day, she sat by his side, her hand resting gently on his fur, offering whatever comfort she could. She whispered to him, even when she didn't know what to say. Sometimes, she just talked about her day, or about things that had happened at school, hoping her voice would bring him some peace. Other times, she sang quietly, unsure of whether or not he could even hear her. But she did it anyway. Every word, every soft touch, became a thread weaving them together. Rex's body was still frail, his ribs visible beneath his damp fur. He wouldn't eat much, his appetite fickle, but Maya persisted. She brought him special food, trying everything she could think of, coaxing him with gentle words, patience, and a love that she hadn't realized she was capable of giving so completely. But even on the hardest days, when Rex refused to eat or move, Maya didn't back down. Her determination became a constant, an anchor. She would not give up on him. One morning, after a particularly difficult night where Rex had hardly moved, Maya sat beside him, her hand resting on his body, her heart in her throat. The light coming through the clinic window was muted by thick clouds, and the low hum of the shelter felt suffocating. There was no easy way to measure the progress they had made, no way to gauge how much longer it would take. But Maya refused to leave, refused to accept that there was no hope. Then, as she sat there, her fingers lightly tracing the outline of his ear, she saw it. A slight shift in his posture. His chest rose and fell with more rhythm, and his breathing, though still shallow, seemed a bit steadier. Rex's eyes flickered, looking toward her. Just for a second, with a focus she hadn't seen before, and then, almost imperceptibly, He shifted his head toward her hand, nudging it gently. Maya's breath caught in her chest. Was it real? Was this a sign? She felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her hand still, resting gently at his side. Rex didn't seem to have the strength to move much yet, but the small motion, that tiny shift, felt like a victory. With renewed hope, she whispered, "I'm here, Rex. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to get through this together." That afternoon, Maya brought him a small bowl of food, his favorite, chicken broth with soft rice. She sat beside him as usual, talking to him softly as she held the bowl just close enough for him to smell. Rex didn't immediately respond, but she didn't let the silence discourage her. She continued to speak in gentle tones, reassuring him that he wasn't alone. It was a little over an hour before Rex finally made a move. His head lifted slightly, his eyes still tired but focused. The sniff of the food brought him to life, his ears flicking toward the bowl. Maya's heart skipped as she gently placed the bowl in front of him. With shaky movements, Rex lowered his head toward the food, his tongue licking the rice. Maya's hand trembled as she held her breath, watching the scene unfold before her. She didn't dare move, didn't dare speak, as Rex took a hesitant bite. Then another, and another. It wasn't much, but it was everything. It was a sign. A small glimmer of the dog she had seen in those first moments. The dog that still had so much fight left in him. Tears welled up in Maya's eyes, and she leaned forward, her hand on his back. She whispered, "You're doing great, Rex. You're doing great." The next few days became a blur of small victories. Every time Rex ate, every time he stood up or took a few steps around the room, Maya's heart swelled. She was learning how to read him. The way he would look at her when he was uncertain. The way his body would tense if he was scared. The way his tail would twitch when he wanted to move, but didn't have the strength. It wasn't just about his physical recovery. It was about rebuilding the trust that had been broken long ago. The emotional healing that had to happen before he could truly believe in the safety of her presence. The bond between them grew deeper with every passing moment. Maya didn't have all the answers. She didn't know if she could save him, but she knew she would never stop trying. Every touch, every word, every gesture was her way of telling Rex that he mattered, that he deserved to fight, to heal, and to live. She had given him a small spark of hope, and now she saw him begin to believe in it too. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The days when Rex seemed to improve were often followed by setbacks. There were nights when he wouldn't eat, when he refused to move, his eyes dull once again with exhaustion. Maya would sit by his side, keeping vigil through the long hours, whispering softly to him, telling him to rest, but assuring him that she was still there. She never faltered. Not once. One evening, as she sat beside him on the cold concrete floor, Rex's breathing became heavier again. His body trembled with the effort, and Maya watched with a heavy heart as his strength seemed to ebb away. This time her own heart shook with uncertainty. Was she doing enough? Was it time to let go? But she knew deep down that there was still life in him. Still a chance. And if she could give him one more reason to fight, she would do it. She whispered, "I won't leave you, Rex. Not now. Not ever." And somehow he heard her. His eyes flickered to hers again, and though his body was weak, the spark in his gaze had returned. Just like that, the dog she had met on the table, the one too broken to move, too exhausted to fight, was beginning to come back to life. And so was she. The first real breakthrough came when Rex took his first full step. It was clumsy, almost uncoordinated, but it was a step. Maya had been sitting on the cold floor next to him, gently brushing his coat, as she had done for days, when she heard a faint rustling. She glanced up just in time to see Rex's body shift. His legs, which had been so stiff for weeks, trembled under his weight as he pushed himself up, one paw, then another, until he was standing, his body swaying like a tree in the wind. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she watched him, her heart hammering in her chest. She had seen this moment coming, of course, the gradual improvement, the little signs. But seeing him standing, seeing him try, was more than she had hoped for. She slowly reached out, her hand trembling, and softly touched his side. He flinched, but not in fear. It was the kind of flinch that only came from exhaustion. His eyes, those once dull, listless eyes, now held a spark of determination even as his body quivered beneath him. "Good boy, Rex," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She didn't know where this strength had come from, this dog who had given up on the world, only to find a reason to stand. It wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something that had been hidden inside him, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Maya had learned this herself in the time they had spent together, how the most fragile parts of us often needed the most time to heal. She had seen it in him, and now, she was starting to see it in herself too. The days that followed were marked by these small victories, each one like a ray of light pushing through a darkened sky. Rex ate more regularly now, and Maya noticed how his body seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. The lines of his face, once sharp with hunger and illness, softened as his coat started to regain its luster. It was as if the more she believed in him, the more he believed in himself. She fed him, bathed him, and slowly, she taught him to trust her again. But it wasn't just about food or medicine. Maya began to take him on short walks in the shelter's yard. At first, Rex could barely make it to the fence before his legs gave out. But Maya didn't push him. She let him rest when he needed to, always sitting with him, letting him know he wasn't alone. The bond between them grew in these quiet moments. His tail, once stiff and unused to movement, started to wag a little more often. His steps, once unsure, began to find their rhythm. There was a lightness to his movements, a sense of joy she hadn't seen before. It wasn't just a recovery of the body, it was a reclaiming of his spirit. There were still challenges. Rex had moments of fear, where his old wounds resurfaced. His body would stiffen, and his eyes would flash with panic, as if he had forgotten where he was. He was still haunted by the neglect and abandonment that had brought him here. And Maya knew in those moments that they were both healing. Not just physically, but emotionally. One evening, after a particularly long walk, Maya sat beside Rex, watching as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard. She ran her hand gently over his back, feeling the warmth of his fur beneath her fingers. He leaned into her touch, seeking comfort in a way that he hadn't done before. Maya felt a swell of emotion rise in her chest as she looked at him. This dog who had once been nothing more than a shell of himself, barely clinging to life. And now, he was here. He was with her. She couldn't help but feel that, in some way, Rex had saved her too. Her life had been in a kind of quiet limbo before she had met him. The days had blurred together. Routine, the same familiar faces, the same familiar tasks. But Rex had changed everything. He had given her purpose. She had fought for him, poured every ounce of her energy into saving him. And in return, he had given her a new sense of self. One that was defined not by fear of failure, but by the courage to keep going, no matter what. In those moments, with Rex by her side, Maya began to realize something she had never fully understood before. Sometimes, the act of giving everything to someone or something else could be the very thing that healed you. The next morning, Rex surprised her once again. He had been a little more tired than usual the day before, and Maya had been prepared for another slow, cautious day. But when she entered the shelter, she found him standing by his bed, his tail wagging in slow, steady movements. His eyes sparkled as he looked at her, as if asking her for something, some new adventure. She knelt down beside him, her hand on his head, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. "Ready for another walk?" she asked, her voice filled with quiet excitement. Rex, in a way that only a dog could, nodded, his body shifting forward in eagerness, his muscles now strong enough to carry him on his own. She stood and reached for his leash, but before she could attach it, Rex took a step toward the door, his paws light and sure. He was ready. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was living. As they walked out into the yard, Maya realized something crucial. She had never been more proud of him than she was in this moment. This dog, this once broken, sick creature, was now standing tall. And more importantly, he was standing with her, side by side. Maya stood by the door, watching as Rex sniffed the air, his nose twitching as he explored the yard. His steps were no longer as shaky as they once had been. There was a fluidity to his movements now, a grace that had been absent when they first met. His fur, though still patchy in places, had regained some of its sheen, and his once dull eyes were now bright with curiosity and, perhaps, a bit of mischief. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The days of coaxing him to eat or walk were behind them, and Rex's recovery had become an almost daily event. His tail wagged more frequently, and his ears perked up at every new sound. He had even started playing, albeit in his own cautious, reserved way. It was clear that he was learning how to be a dog again, learning to enjoy the small pleasures of life he had once taken for granted. But it wasn't just the physical recovery that struck Maya most. It was the way Rex had begun to trust again, the way his eyes softened when she approached, the way his body leaned into her touch, seeking affection and comfort. This wasn't just about his body healing, it was about his soul. The emotional scars he carried ran deep. There were moments when his old fears surfaced, when a sudden movement or noise would make him cower, his body tense, as if he were bracing for an impact that never came. Maya would always sit with him then, her hands gentle, her voice soothing, until the fear ebbed away. These moments of vulnerability were hard to watch, but Maya understood them. She had her own scars, though they were less visible, buried beneath layers of routine and distractions. Rex's journey was helping her confront her own. As she sat next to him one morning, her hand resting lightly on his back as he lay on the grass, Maya felt the weight of their shared experience. She had started this journey thinking that she was saving him, but somewhere along the way, she had realized that it wasn't just Rex who was being healed. It was her too. She had spent most of her life feeling disconnected from those around her. Her parents, her friends, even herself. There was always something missing, something she couldn't put into words. But now, as she sat next to Rex, watching the wind ruffle his fur, she understood. She had been missing connection. The kind that went beyond words, beyond understanding. The kind of connection that simply existed between two souls who trusted one another, who fought for each other. Rex shifted, sitting up and looking at her, his eyes filled with a quiet intelligence. There was a moment of stillness between them, a moment where everything else in the world fell away. He didn't need to speak. She didn't need to explain. They just were together, and that was enough. The healing process was far from over for either of them. There were still nights when Rex would wake up with a low whine, his body tense, as if he were still trapped in his past. But those moments were becoming fewer, and Maya knew that each one was just another step forward, another layer of the past that he would shed in time. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, Maya stood in the yard, looking at Rex as he trotted around, his body strong and agile now. He had come so far, further than either of them had thought possible. The once sickly dog, who had been on the brink of death, was now thriving, full of life. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living, with a future ahead of him. She couldn't help but smile as she watched him. He was beautiful in every way that mattered, and the bond between them, forged in moments of quiet persistence and unconditional love, was stronger than anything she had ever known. Maya took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill her lungs, and looked up at the sky. The first stars were beginning to appear, twinkling faintly in the vast expanse. It was a peaceful moment, one that felt right, like the world was in perfect balance. And then Rex ran up to her, his tail wagging excitedly, his eyes bright with joy. He nuzzled her hand, asking for attention, for love. Maya knelt down to meet him, her heart swelling with affection. She wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. His fur, soft and now healthy, brushed against her cheek, and she laughed softly. "You're my boy, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice full of emotion. Rex looked up at her, his tail wagging even faster, his body vibrating with happiness. In that moment, Maya realized something. The healing they had gone through, together as a team, had brought them to this point. They weren't just two individuals anymore. They were a family. They were a unit, a team, bound by trust and love. Maya could feel her heart swell with a deep sense of gratitude. She had helped Rex find his strength again, but in doing so, he had helped her find hers. He had taught her the true meaning of resilience, not just physical strength, but emotional strength. He had shown her that healing wasn't just about fixing broken bodies. It was about the strength to trust again, the courage to open your heart, and the willingness to fight for something you love, even when the odds are against you. She stood, pulling Rex to his feet, and they walked together into the house, side by side. He trotted ahead of her, but occasionally glanced back, checking to see if she was still there. Maya smiled to herself, knowing that no matter what happened next, they would always be there for each other. The air was warm as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. Maya stood at the edge of the yard, watching Rex trot across the grass. His body was strong now, muscular and sleek, his movements fluid and confident. She could hardly believe how far he had come since that first day when he lay on the clinic table, lifeless and near death. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous, and yet, Maya knew deep in her heart that it wasn't just the physical healing that mattered. It was the emotional rebirth, the reclamation of trust and hope that had truly saved him. Rex stopped in his tracks, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air, his ears flicking back at the sound of a distant bird. Maya smiled softly, watching as he darted toward the tree line, his tail wagging happily behind him. She couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of pride. He was free now, truly free. Free to run, to explore, to live without the shadow of fear hanging over him. Free to be the dog he had always been, before life had turned cruel and cold. Her heart swelled in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite put into words. It was a mixture of gratitude and love, of knowing that they had both made it through the darkness and into something new, something brighter. But as Maya stood there, a quiet voice echoed in her mind. The fight hadn't been over yet. It wasn't just about getting Rex back on his feet physically. It was about the future that lay ahead for them both. They had come so far, but the road ahead was still uncertain. Maya had never been someone to look too far into the future, never one to make plans that she couldn't control. But with Rex, she had learned that sometimes the future could be something you built, not something you waited for. She had taken a leap when she chose to save him, and now, with him beside her, she felt a new kind of courage, one that made her believe in possibilities, in new beginnings. The thought made her pause. What would life look like for them now? Could they ever truly escape the past, the scars they both carried? She knew there would always be days when the memories of Rex's suffering, of the dog who had been left to die, would haunt them. There would be moments of fear, of doubt, even in his strongest days. But it wasn't the past that defined them anymore. It was the future they were creating together. She took a deep breath, watching Rex chase after a butterfly with joyful abandon, and smiled. The past had taught them both harsh lessons. But those lessons had shaped them into something more resilient, more capable of embracing the future. And in that moment, Maya understood that the future was not just something you waited for. It was something you forged, step by step, with every choice you made. Her mind drifted back to the day she had first met Rex. She had been so unsure of what to do, torn between the fear of failing him and the overwhelming desire to save him. But now, looking at him, so full of life, so full of potential, Maya knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back. She had made the right choice. Rex stopped in front of her, panting lightly, his eyes bright and happy. He stood still for a moment, as if waiting for her, and Maya bent down to rub his ears, feeling the warmth of his body against her hands. She could feel the bond between them, stronger now than ever. It was more than just a connection. It was a promise. A promise that they would face whatever came next together. "Come on, Rex," Maya said softly, her voice full of affection. "Let's go for a walk." And with that simple command, Rex's tail wagged even faster, and he darted ahead, eager for the new adventure that awaited them both. Maya followed, her heart light, her steps sure, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together. As they walked through the yard, Maya thought about everything they had been through. She had saved Rex, yes, but Rex had also saved her in ways she hadn't expected. He had reminded her of the strength inside herself, the part of her that was capable of loving fiercely, of fighting for something even when the odds seemed impossible. She couldn't help but think about how different her life was now. The loneliness she had once felt, The emptiness she had carried around for so long seemed to have faded away. Rex had filled that space not with just his presence, but with something far more important: his trust, his love, his unwavering companionship. He had become her family, and for the first time in a long while, Maya felt complete. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the warmth of the day wrapped around them like a comforting embrace. Maya walked beside Rex, her hand brushing against his fur as they moved together through the yard. It wasn't just a walk. It was a symbol of everything they had overcome, everything they had yet to face. The world was open to them now, and Maya felt an unshakable sense of peace settle over her. The future, though unknown, no longer felt like a burden. It felt like an adventure.